to our second edition of Peace Talks. This is where we catch up with the bands that are coming up to play for us in Worcester at the Mars Bar. And today we've got Lucy Sparks and Austin Shepherd from the Bristol-based Laimu. They're going to be playing this Thursday, just a couple of days away, Thursday the 30th of March. So thanks for joining us today, Lucy and Austin.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start with the band Laimu. Kind of how did you get together, and I'm also intrigued where the name came from. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the band.
So most of us met at uni. So we studied music here in Bristol at BIM. All studied like various different courses, and we actually formed after we graduated, really, didn't we? I think we all did lots of different projects throughout. Like when you do a music, like kind of contemporary music degree, it's very full on with working with lots of different musicians and doing lots of kind of temporary versions of bands. And then I think we all felt that it was a genre and kind of, I don't know, we all just had like a similar shared tastes of a sound that we wanted to create and pursue, and write original music within. So yeah, we all kind of formed. We've had a few different members pass through, and a few different kind of variations of the band lineup. But yeah, the sort of bulk of us met at uni, and then a couple of other people have come through from different, I guess, just different corners of the Bristol music scene.
Excellent. And the name?
The name, so it's actually really doesn't have a huge amount of sentimental meaning, I guess, behind it. It actually means lime in Japanese, and yeah, it was just a random choice, to be honest, wasn't it?
We're big fans of citrus fruit, Japanese philosophy. So the hybrid of those two things was really a no-brainer.
And orange is overrepresented, and oranges and lemons. So yeah, why not go with lime, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So your music's, I mean, it fits in great with what we're doing with Music Spoken Here. Is trying to sort of get more original music that's, you know, jazz influence, but is kind of accessible and you know, more attractive to sort of today's audience. But what are your own sort of influences sort of coming through?
I think we have quite varying influences, really, I would say. For me, like, I have always been a big fan of like jazz singers. So, you know, the greats, obviously, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Etta James, they were all voices which I really kind of got into when I guess when I was about 13 or 14, and I started taking singing lessons. And yeah, I just found that those were songs that I felt really inspired by, like vocally, probably more vocally than musically. And then obviously people like Amy Winehouse, even like Duffy, like, you know, when you're that age, you're kind of paying attention to pop, and not necessarily focusing too much on like the old school stuff, but I was always really taken by it. And then I think, you know, more recently in the last 6, 7, 8 years, I guess the more contemporary kind of jazz fusion-y type acts, so people like Hiatus Coyote were definitely artists and bands who I was really, really obsessed with. Even like Cleo Soul, I'm a big fan of. And then yeah, big R&B voices. I've always loved R&B, so even like Alicia Keys, and kind of anyone who takes influence from all of those different genres and creates a fusion. I've always been really fascinated by. Yeah.
And Austin, how about yourself?
I think for me, I sort of came at it from just always a love of chords and how chords work with each other. And then was never really, I grew up around jazz a little bit with the family liking it and stuff like that, but it was never really my thing. Really into hip hop, and then through just loving meandering chord progressions and hip hop, it somehow came around into the sort of space that we're in at the moment. So, you know, I never really would call myself a jazz musician, far from it really, but it sort of ends up roughly being the sound that we create. purely because we sort of like harmonically interesting compositions, but it's also inspired by music that's indirectly inspired by jazz, I suppose. That's sort of a bit of a roundabout way of saying I agree with you.
I think you've always been a big fan of people like Tom York and Radiohead, and I think our music, whilst it definitely has jazz, soul, R&B flavors to it, I think there is also an element of the kind of experimental guitar-y, a few like psychedelic. I know that I'm not saying Radiohead are like a psychedelic band, but I think there's definitely some of those influences come through perhaps in some of the little
comes across maybe in the album cover as well, the artwork on the album cover.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, inadvertently. And yeah, I mean the rest of the guys like Matt, who's our trumpet player, is an amazing like jazz trumpet player. So he's definitely got like firm kind of traditional training in that sense. But he's also, you know, a big fan of like contemporary music and some of the, I don't know, Kamasi Washington and even like Ezra Collective, people like that. I know that he's a big fan of that kind of like the modern new age acts which have come through in more recent years, as well as, of course, you know, all of the legends who he's probably inspired by to first pick up the trumpet in the first place. And yeah, the guys all have, you know, we all have different influences and listen to all really different eclectic music. But I think we all definitely have a shared love, like you said, of interesting chords and like just really groove-led music.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I think, you know, where it's going. It's you know, jazz has moved on so much, and it's that kind of mixing and fusion and with everything else that's going on, just keeps it interesting. So yeah, just touched on your Circles EP, that was released in December, wasn't it, last year?
Yeah.
So that's out. Got some great radio play recently. I saw Jazz FM have picked it up. Yolanda Brown and China Moses.
Yeah.
Track of the week. That's awesome. And all the music you've released so far has been original, your own material, right?
Yeah, all original.
Yeah. So what's your process for writing when you're sort of putting some new stuff together? I know you got a couple of new songs coming up for us Thursday, haven't you, that you've been working on? So I'm really keen to listen to those. But yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of how the band goes about writing and putting it all together.
I think it varies, doesn't it? With the EP, we recorded that all ourselves as well in a little sort of DIY studio. So the process there was kind of different for those tracks. We sort of wrote them separately away from the other members, and then brought them together in the studio and layered it up like that, which is kind of different to the way we've done things before. But really, it depends. I think if you keep writing in the same way, you know, all get in a room, come up with an idea, and then do melodies over the top of it, it can get kind of stale, and vice versa. If you try and just write something in isolation and then bring it to the band, it can be equally as. So I think, yeah, it depends. But that's what's nice, is the songs come out in different ways and they sound different because of it, which I think is good.
Yeah, I mean, there's times where we just get in a room and just jam, and it actually happened last week where we got together and we just like, sometimes there's just an energy where everyone's just, you know, Pete will start playing a groove on the drums and then you'll come up with a few little chord changes, and then sometimes like it just comes together like that. Everybody just gels and feels really connected with, you know, the ideas that we're jamming. Other times, you know, there'll be like a really solid idea that we all love, whether it's like a guitar. You're really good at coming up with like the vision of the song and what you think each part should look like. And I think sometimes, you know, we might have a bit of an idea together that we come up with on the guitar and the vocals, and then take it to the band. And then, you know, we'll have an idea of what the structure looks like, but they'll kind of develop it themselves. Obviously, you know, we don't want to like prescribe parts to people, because it is very, very collaborative, and the magic is in how people embellish it, you know, from their own perspectives and with their own craft for their instrument that they play. Yeah, and I think for me, like lyrically, I have a few different ways. Like I quite often just write down like lyric ideas. I guess you could call them poems, in their kind of like initial state. And then they might sit in my notes in my phone for like months or even years, and then we'll start jamming an idea, and then I'll look through lyrics and kind of have a go at singing a few different words and phrases that I've come up with, and then yeah, if it feels natural, then we'll sort of run with it, and then I'll develop it from there. Sometimes also we just jam and I'll come up with a melody, and then I'll kind of fit the lyrics around that. So yeah, it definitely varies, but main thing is it's very, very collaborative with the whole band.
Yeah, no, that's cool. No, I think that comes through with the recorded stuff that I've listened to, and I did catch up in over in Bristol just a few weeks ago, so it was great to get out and hear you play there. When you're performing live, do you how much within the band do you sort of open it up for that sort of bit of jamming and a bit of improvisation? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'd
That
say
sort of
so.
vibe?
We definitely allow space for solos within the tracks. I think quite a lot of what we do is like pretty like pre-executed, our set, but there's certainly within a lot of our tunes when we play them live, there's space for solos, and obviously the solos are always improvised from whoever it is that's taking them.
I think as well, like if we do respond, naturally to a crowd, and if there's a certain section that feels like it needs to go on for longer, we'll kind of we'll communicate it within the group and keep things going. If it's the right moment, if it's a certain, if the crowd's a really dancey sort of crowd, there'll be certain sections that we'll sometimes it's a bit unnerving because you have to just you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position sometimes when you do that, but most of the time it works nicely.
Yeah, I think we've got a really good sort of on stage way of communicating with each other.
What, shouting?
Yeah.
Nodding or pointing with a finger.
Good language that we all understand, I think. Yeah.
Excellent. So so the EP December, you say you're working on some new tracks. So what's your plans for 2023, the rest of the year?
More new music for sure. Yeah, I mean, we released the EP and that was like a real labor of love for us. We self-recorded it and self-produced it, like Austin said. And that took a while. There are various kind of factors. Obviously, we had a lockdown and COVID throughout that, which did kind of hold things up a little bit. But yeah, I think we want to keep momentum going. We're kind of always coming up with new songs and developing new ideas. We were in the studio last month where we recorded a double A side, so that's going to be on its way soon. We've got some festival bookings for the summer. Yeah, just more of the same, really. More music, more gigs. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, hopefully it'll be a larger new audience for you in Worcester. First time in Worcester, isn't it, for you guys? So
It is indeed.
yeah, get your music out in front of those and have some more people sort of following you for the festival dates and any upcoming gigs elsewhere. So thanks so much for joining us today then for a brief chat, and really looking forward to meeting you and welcoming you to the Mars Bar in Worcester on Thursday.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
We can't wait. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks very much.